1980 to now, American politics has been anomalously a draw. Neither party controls the whole thing. We had 8 years under Reagan, but then it was mostly a Democratic Congress. And then we had 8 years under Clinton, but the Republicans swept the Congress in 1994. We've had 8 years of Obama, but for most of that time we've had a Republican Congress. And then suddenly now, unexpectedly, everything was up for grabs. And by everything I mean the Congress, and the presidency, and in some sense the court. And it looked like an impossible election because there was a terrifying array of forces on the other side. I don't just mean that Hillary had the money, the organization. I don't just mean that the Republican Party was divided. There was a kind of civil war within the Republican Party over our own candidate. And then you have to add academia and the media and Hollywood. I mean, I just remember turning on my TV every day and you just see the media, huffing and puffing to drag that crooked hag across the finish line. But it's a new day in America. It's a new day in America, and Trump, I have to say, is out the gate like a maniac. I mean, this guy, I'm a veteran of the Reagan years, and Reagan's strategy was kind of the opposite of Trump's. Reagan's was to, in a sense, apply laser-like focus to 2 or 3 main issues that he cared the most about. But the downside of that is that Reagan let everything else kind of go. Reagan didn't want to get involved in a lot of little things. He didn't want to go into the Department of Housing and Urban Development. To him, that was a rat hole of public policy. If you went in, you'd never come out. So he focused on the Soviet Union, he focused on taxes, he focused on inflation, and that's it. Trump fights on all fronts.
Yeah.
This guy is trying to pass legislation, and he just saved the Supreme Court. But not only on the public policy front, he also is finding time to swat Meryl Streep and take on Saturday Night Live. He's out of control. He's out of control. Now, being out of control means that Trump's quality is that American politics operates in a sort of narrow lane. And there are tall fences erected on both sides, and both parties, Republicans and Democrats, are expected, if not required, to march in that lane. Now, the important thing to recognize is that the parameters of that lane and those walls have actually been erected by our enemies. And so we are forced by necessity to travel in a narrow path, and Trump refuses to do it. He won't travel down that path. Now, what's really going on in American politics? Why do we even have a lane at all? Why is it the case that for so long the Republican Party has had such difficulty making headway, even while controlling majorities? We just, in a sense, saved the Supreme Court. I don't mean we won the Supreme Court, but we're holding the Supreme Court with the Gorsuch assent to the court. But most of those court nominees are Republicans. They're Republican nominees. Now, the problem of the court is that the Democrats can count with Euclidean certitude that their nominees will vote their way every single time. With us, it's a toss of the coin. Oh, how's Anthony Kennedy going to do this today? Oh, we got Kennedy. Whoops, we lost Roberts. And so there is an asymmetry of if you will, determination, or may I say fanaticism, with which they approach the court as opposed to us. The other question I've been thinking about for a while is that for the last several years, during the Obama years, a lot of people on our side have been wondering why our own side is so ineffective. And I hear a lot as I travel around the country, you know, that's because Boehner is a wimp and McConnell is a wimp. And part of what I've been thinking about is, why is that? Certainly it can't be that we want the other side to win. So why does our side act in this strange way? It often creates recriminations within our own camp. We turn against our own leaders. Why do they behave that way? I want to try to answer that question. I think that the reason they behave that way is they are terrified of the media. Terrified of the media. And that's because the media in this country has the power to humiliate, to terrorize, and to destroy. And they have so much power to do this that once they pick a target and they're done with you, they destroy you so badly that your own side will bury you. And our team and our leaders know that. And as a result, they internalize this, because remember that while we as Republicans, every 2 years, every 4 years, we kind of get whipped up into a frenzy and we start fighting out the election, but we don't realize that there's actually a much bigger battlefield. And while we're fighting the election right over here in this corner, the left has conducted this long march through the institutions, by which I mean media, and I mean Hollywood, and I mean Broadway, and I mean academia, increasingly elementary and secondary schools. I call these the big megaphones of our culture. They're how you get information out. And while our victories are temporary, there's going to be another election, we got to win again, the left owns this territory. We can't get it back. You can send Carol Swain to teach at Vanderbilt, where she gets isolated as a pariah. You can send me to speak at Yale. I'll speak on Monday. I'll be gone on Tuesday. But the professors are there every day. How would we as conservatives even begin to retake the universities? Could we start 300 new campuses of our own? So my point is that the left has these megaphones, and as a result, they control the narrative. They get to sort of tell a story, and the story is amplified and it reverberates, and we're almost powerless to fight back. I mean, one reason the media is so upset about Trump's tweets, his tweets, for God's sake, is that they prevent, the tweets have no filter in more senses than one. They're unfiltered. But that also means the media doesn't get to filter them. But they still control the narrative. And one reason, for most of my career, I've been sort of a think tank guy at AEI, then at the Hoover Institution. I've sort of pivoted in my career. And the reason I started making movies is to take on the narrative. Take on the narrative. Now, the great power of the leftist narrative in the past generation has been that the Republican Party is the party of bigotry. That has been their crucifying blow against us. And it has been a devastating blow to the point that at least one head of the RNC has been going around apologizing to minorities for the role of the Republican Party. Now, the reason in Hillary's America, it's a kind of a strange movie, I have to admit. It's very different than my movie on Obama. First of all, I didn't want to make a movie just about Hillary, because I think that most people, after watching a movie just about Hillary, would want to put a bullet through their heads. I mean, who can watch a movie about Hillary for 90 minutes? Obama was at least kind of intriguing, if only in a kind of perverted sort of way. But that's why I decided not to make a movie about Hillary, but to take on the leftist narrative and actually show not only that the narrative was wrong, but ask the question, how has the left been able to get away with it? Think about this. How does a party that was the champion of slavery for 50 years, the inventor of the so-called positive good school of slavery, the party that passed every segregation law in the South, the party that in a sense founded and revived the Ku Klux Klan, the party that was engaged in racial terrorism against blacks for 30 years, and the party that opposed the civil rights movement of the 1960s. This is actually not well known. The Republican Party made those laws possible. All of them. The Voting Rights Act, the Fair Housing Bill, the Civil Rights Act of 1964. If the Democratic Party had been the only party in Congress, no Republicans, all those laws would have been defeated. This is the actual record of the Democratic Party. So how does the Democratic Party unbelievably turn around, appoint itself the guardian of civil rights, and point its finger at the Republican Party, the party of emancipation, the party that fought segregation, the party that outlawed the Ku Klux Klan? How do they pull this off? Well, one answer, of course, is that they dominate the organs of culture. But the other answer is that the Democrats have been very, very clever. I've been struck this evening about a couple of references to the Confederate flag and the symbols of, and it occurred to me, this is what the reason we're even having this debate is what the Democrats have done is taken all the bad stuff that they did and blamed it on the South, the white man, and America.
Right.
America did this. America did that. Wait a minute. If America did it, it would still be going on. Obviously, some Americans did it, and other Americans stopped them. By and large, they did it, and we stopped them. Yeah. This is the actual history of the Republican Party.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of these issues, the Confederate flag, states' rights, the reason these issues are controversial is because they are pegged to the bad stuff done by the Democratic Party. States' rights.
True.
There is nothing wrong with states' rights. But states' rights as an issue contains the odor of racism. It contains the odor of slavery. Why? Because that's how the Democrats used it. They polluted the issue. There's nothing wrong with the Confederate flag. But the Democratic Party defiled the Confederate flag by inventing, if you will, a doctrine of slavery attached to it that was actually not unique to the South. Most Southerners did not own slaves.
Right.
The Northern Democrats, led by Stephen Douglas, actively promoted and defended slavery. So the real slavery debate, let's be honest, was not between the North and the South. It was between the anti-slavery Republican Party and the pro-slavery Democratic Party. And that's a fact.
That's right. That's right.
Now, in the Trump era, the Democrats have been somewhat stung by this counterattack. The race card is sort of not playing so well anymore. They tried it against Sessions to block his nomination. And so the Democrats have, in a very clever way, and they're very good at this, come up with something new. And this is going to be, I think, the argument going forward. Their new argument is not that the Republican Party is the party of racism.
That's right.
It's that Trump and the Republicans are the party of fascism. Fascism. Now, when we encounter the media, you know, we often try to zoom in and catch the media, catch the Democrats in lies. And we catch a lot of the retail lies. You know, if you want to keep your doctor, you can keep your doctor. That's a lie. The reason we had Benghazi was because of a video. That's a lie. And so the Democrats are always being caught red-handed with these retail lies, but it's much more difficult to catch them at what can be called wholesale lies. The wholesale lies are the big lies behind the small lies. And the big lies are so big, they're sort of umbrella lies. I call them, in terms of the media, meta stories. So the meta story right now is that Trump and the GOP are fascist. They're fascist, why? Because Trump is a bully. I was listening to an interview on NPR, and I was listening to this Robert Paxton from Columbia University. He goes, when Trump stands up and crosses his arms and looks to the left, he looks exactly like Mussolini. I guess he could also have pointed out that Trump and Mussolini both like Italian food. But, you know, the indictment continues. Trump is a racist. Trump referred to a judge as a Mexican. Wait a minute. We're talking about a Mexican-American. That's like calling me an Indian. I mean, okay, if it might even be insensitive, but insensitivity is not bigotry. Here's the point. Trump is... all of this business, or open the newspaper just about every day. New York Times, a few days ago. Immigrants are living in fear because of Trump. Immigrants. Debbie's an immigrant, my wife, from Venezuela. I'm an immigrant from India. We are not living in fear. Why? Because we are not about to be deported. Why? Because we are immigrants. What's going on here is a very clever blurring of the distinction, not between immigrants and illegal immigrants, because illegal immigrants are not immigrants.
Right.
Immigrants and illegal aliens. Now, but what about their constitutional rights? Now wait a minute. This is not a matter of fascism. You have to go to John Locke and John Stuart Mill and the founders of classical liberalism to realize that every society is a bargain. It's a social compact. It's a bunch of people who come together like in a club, and they agree upon certain rules, and they make certain protections which are only for their own members. Which is to say that the rights of the U.S. Constitution do not apply to aliens. They have no constitutional rights.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm not saying they don't have natural rights or human rights or human dignity, but they don't have a First Amendment right or a Fifth Amendment right. Now, fascism, for anyone who knows about it, is an ideology of collectivism. Remember the name of the Nazi Party, the National Socialist Party. Hitler demanded that the word socialist be added and italicized in the name. Mussolini was a Marxist. The basic ideology of fascism was centralization of power. So we have fascist ideology, and we have fascist tactics. Have you been seeing what's happening in America right around you and on the campus? I mean, look at the inauguration. Masked protesters carrying brickbats and covering their faces, blocking barricades, overturning cars, setting fire to things, smashing stores, beating people up. On campuses, the same thing again and again and again. My colleague Charles Murray just went to Middlebury College. A group of these so-called anti-fascists show up, all masked and all black. They block his entrance to the auditorium. They grab the professor who's sponsoring the event. They pull her hair. She has to go to the hospital. Her neck is twisted. So this is going on in America right now. If we did it to them, imagine if we were to boycott Obama's inauguration. Imagine if we were to demand recounts in states that weren't even close. Imagine if we were to disrupt the inauguration. Well, we don't think like this. We don't operate like this. Every day when I go on Twitter, in 5 seconds, 10 paid leftists come on my Twitter and denounce me in every imaginable way. They attack my looks, they attack my family, they call me a felon. They go to town on me. Why? They want to humiliate me. They want me to drive me out of public life. Now, when Nancy Pelosi goes on Twitter, we don't have 10 guys who go on her site to make fun of her, attack her, abuse her, ridicule her family, talk about how... We don't do any of that. We don't even think about it. I mean, I do, but most So the point I'm trying to make here is that the left is the one that feels licensed to take any action that it can, whatever, to achieve its goals. Where does that come from? What gives them the feeling that it's okay to do this? Is it merely the kind of weakness, pusillanimity, and invertebrate response from our side? We let them? In the 1960s, there was a professor at Berkeley named Herbert Marcuse who came up with a slogan, and his slogan was "No free speech for fascists." And basically he argued in a famous essay, he said, we, the left, we're the party of tolerance. But, he said, we don't have to be tolerant of intolerant people. Therefore, we are fully justified in using any means necessary to take them on, including violence, including obstruction, including bending the law, using the power of the state if we have it. And he uses the analogy to Hitler. He goes, what would you be willing to do to stop Hitler in the 1930s? Answer, anything. Because think of all the loss of life and catastrophe that you'd be preventing later. So this is how the left is operating. And the media have signed off on this, and the underlying meta story, the big lie, we, the Republicans, are the party of fascism. As I say, this is the left's big lie. This is their big lie. If one looks at fascist ideology, if one looks at fascist tactics, they're the ones who do it. They're the ones who do it. So they're engaging in fascism supposedly to fight fascism. Now, where does this leave us? I want to say that I think now we are in a situation, part of the reason I've pivoted my career, as I mentioned a moment ago, is because we can't allow the left to enjoy this uncontrolled monopoly of public space. Because otherwise, think about it this way, and a professor comes up with a study. Because it serves the purposes of the left, 20 other professors tell you it's the most brilliant study ever written. And then it's reported in the New York Times, and there's an admiring profile in Vanity Fair, and there's articles in the New Yorker and the New York Review of Books, and then Hollywood makes a movie about it. The left is literally reverberating and magnifying its own ideas. And it doesn't matter if it's a lie. It doesn't matter if we know it's a lie. Let's say you know it's a lie. What will you do about it? You don't have a megaphone that big to contest what's out there. The left not only controls the academic or highbrow world, they also control the world of, let's say, low entertainment, comedy. Okay, they have Colbert, they have Jon Stewart, they have John Oliver, they have Bill Maher. And the list goes on. We pretty much have nobody, 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 and nobody. And this is where young people get not only their political information, but their whole sense of what it means to be cool, and how to walk, and how to talk, and how to be an American. Now, I guess what I'm trying to say is that we won. We're actually in a really strong position. We've been given a reprieve, a big reprieve. But we have to play it well. We have to recognize we're in a big fight, and the other side is not letting up. If we had lost the country, we would all be basically sitting at the bar right now, commiserating with each other. The left is actually fighting on every front. Now, where we are now, I think, is we need to contest their monopoly in the cultural arena. Recognize it's a much bigger battlefield than we previously thought. Recognize that when you look at things like the court, ultimately, we're fighting for the rule of law itself.
Right.
Here's the thing. Today, if you go on a campus and you ask young people, what is a conservative? In other words, conservatives are supposed to conserve. What is it that conservatives want to conserve? Most young people would just give you a big gaping stare. Even on the best campuses in America, they have no idea. which is another way of saying they don't reject conservatism. They don't know what it is. They don't know what it is. So what is it? What are we trying to conserve? Well, what we're trying to conserve, if we think about it, are the principles of the American Revolution. Well, I don't just mean as they existed then. Our job is to apply them now. How do old principles find their application in the 21st century? That's what we're all about. I was speaking to a group of South Asian students at Harvard University some years ago, and a young woman asked me a question that was actually quite poignant. She had described the trauma of the immigrant experience, which is the experience of moving, if you will, from one country to another. It's kind of like moving across a tightrope from one tall building to another. And as she described it, you sort of leave one building and you walk the tightrope, but at a certain point you feel this sense of vertigo because you don't belong to the building you left, let's call it India, but neither do you feel fully American. You haven't arrived in the other building yet. You're in this kind of no man's land. A lot of immigrants feel this sense of displacement. And then the question she was asking me is very simple. She goes, Mr. D'Souza, how will I know when I have become an American? And I said, well, you'll know you've become an American when you become a Republican.
That's good.
Which I meant half jokingly, but only half jokingly, because my point is that it is we, the Republican Party, that are the custodians of the American dream. I mean, look at us, we're a pretty sorry bunch. I don't know if we can do this. And yet, by tragic necessity, it is our fate to be put in a time of history when the American dream hangs in the balance. And when a fierce opposition party has arisen that controls large areas of our culture, we've let them have it. And they've now turned it against us. And they're attacking us in the worst way possible. If there is one charge that is even more incendiary than racist, it's Nazi, fascist. Their goal is not to provide responsible opposition to Trump, prevent the Republican Party from enacting its this is not their goal. Their goal is scorched earth. It's to destroy the Trump administration, to get him out of there long before his 4-year term is up, to take the taint of Trump and fascism and stick it on the Republican Party if they can for 50 years. That's what they're up to. They know exactly what they're doing. And my point is, do we? Do we have a strategy, a plan, a way of thinking beyond the immediate parameters of elections? How do we take on this challenge? Ultimately, the challenge isn't about ISIS. We can swat ISIS with a fly swatter. If we were more united here in America. And so, I leave you with the message that the Republican Party, to me, is the hope of America. I came to America I listened to Carol's story, and our backgrounds couldn't be more different. I came to the United States as a kid from India, 17 years old, with $500 in my pocket. I had a good family, I had a good education, but I was in a new country. And so, in some senses, a country is judged not by what provision it makes for its most successful citizens, but what kind of ladders of opportunity does a country build that allow people who are starting out at the bottom to improve their life. I don't just mean financially. To be the architects of our own destiny. If you look at Carol's life, it's a beautiful work of art. And we live in a country where our life is like a blank sheet of paper and we are the artists. We live in a country where we are the architects of our own destiny. And the Republican Party is the party that defends this, protects it, not just for Republicans, but for everybody. So we have a great history, we have a great record. We have a party that has very little to be ashamed of in America. Most of the shameful things that have been done in America have actually been done by the other party.
That's right.
But in the cunning fashion for which they have become well known, the very people who have poisoned the wells are now pretending to show up as the water commissioner. They're pretending to show up as the ones to solve these problems that they created, I don't think we should let them get away with it. We have to expose their big lie. And the final word about Trump. He's an outsider, and as a result, he brings great strengths and some weaknesses. He sure knows how to throw a punch, but whenever he throws a punch, there's a little part of me that hopes he doesn't knock himself out of the ring. He needs the Republican Party, he needs to legislate, he needs to also build a lasting coalition. It's almost miraculous. I mean, it was difficult enough for Trump to hold all the states that hung in the balance. North Carolina, Florida, Ohio, Virginia. Much more difficult was to win Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. Did not get Virginia, sorry. So Trump is he's not trying to remake conservatism. Some of the intellectual conservatives want Trump is trying to redefine conservatism. I don't think he is. Even on trade. People say, wait a minute, does he defend tariffs? I don't think so. Here's the point. We are for free trade, but we don't live in a free trade world. Mm-hmm. So when we try to sell cars in Japan, they stick heavy tariffs on them. And then they want to sell cars here, and we don't put tariffs on those. I suppose an economist would say it's better for us not to have tariffs than for both sides to have tariffs. But I don't think Trump sees it that way. Trump sees it politically. What is the best way to get those dudes to take their tariffs down? And that is to sit them across the table and say, listen, pal, if you're going to stick a 30% tab on our cars, we're going to be sticking a 30% tab on your cars. Tell us what you think about that. Now, quite frankly, that is not a betrayal of free trade. That is a use of political strong-arm muscle in order to achieve free trade.
Yes.
To achieve free trade. Trump is trying to remake the Republican Party. I think instinctively he realizes that it's a party that even in victory acts like we lost. We always act like we lost. And the reason it always feels like we lost is that the other side can pummel us every single day in the media. Even the political fights we lose are often fought in the culture before they reach politics. People say, well, how do we lose gay marriage? That's because we started fighting politically about gay marriage 5 years ago. The left started fighting gay marriage when Ellen came out of the closet. And Will and Grace had 500 sitcoms. And so by the time the issue came up for a vote, it was a fait accompli. It was a done deal. They'd already won. Because they had already shifted the assumptions of people, especially young people, including our own sons and daughters, and they've done it over 25 years. So my message to the Republicans is, we are the party of the American dream. We have the means, we have the resources, we have the creativity. We can win this fight, but it's going to be up to us to fight well, to fight determinedly, and in the closing words of the 1960s, if not now, when? And if not us, who? Thank you very much. Thank you.